I see our numbers here in the room are dwindling. I assume that's because we're past the midterm and because some people are leaving town perhaps early, given that this is spring break week or something like that. I will still hold class on Wednesday, and it will all be fair game for the exam. That being said, it will be, I will send around the links. Though I've been having trouble with this video link, somebody has messed with the computer settings, and now I can only get the video of this overhead, which is not what I'm set up for. So that's kind of stinks. I will have somebody look into it. Because, you know, we haven't had enough computer difficulties this semester. As a reward, on Wednesday, I will give you the inductive mathematical statistical formula for maximizing your possibilities of marrying your soulmate. So that'll be fun. All right, for your clickerware, today's session number is 761332. Again, that's 761332. All right, and let's begin. All right, so here's what analogical reasoning is. Analogical reasoning is where we attempt to predict unseen similarities between two objects that seem very similar. That'd be really bad. I can do better than that. There we go. In fact, that'd be really nice if that fixed the live stream. I wouldn't count on it. Nope, they're still stuck with that image. Oh well. All right, so where was I? All right, so that's where we attempt to predict unseen similarities between two objects based on the number of already identified similarities. The reasoning often looks something like this. I was in a casino yesterday. It had an all-you-can-eat buffet. This is a second casino I'm in today. It looks similar to the first in many ways. Therefore, I bet this casino also has an all-you-can-eat buffet. For those of you who've never been to Las Vegas, many casinos are well known for their overly indulgent all-you-can-eat buffets. It used to be one of the ways that they try to get people to come in to the casino in the first place. And if casinos aren't your thing, you know, it might look something like this. I watched the first Harry Potter movie. I liked it. It featured witches, wizards, and magic. I've seen the preview for the next Harry Potter movie, and it looks similar in many ways. Therefore, I predict it will feature witches, wizards, and magic. Shocking. And that's how very sort of crude analogical reasoning works. And frankly, this is why Hollywood likes to sell you a sequel of anything that you spent your money on once. Because they think you'll do this analogy thing, they can sell you a very mediocre movie that looks similar on the surface. So that's roughly what analogical reasoning looks like. Another way of thinking about analogical reasoning is this. Analogical reasoning is like reasoning from a statistical sample, except what's your sample size? It's reasoning from a sample size of 1. Therefore, it's like way less reliable. But sometimes it's the best we can do. One of the things you have to realize about reasoning is, you know, sometimes we have situations where we can't, there's no way, even in principle, we could get the amount of evidence we would want for something. We still have to figure out what to believe, and we have to take an educated guess. And if you're good at educated guessing, you can really succeed at a lot of stuff in life. And if you are bad at educated guessing, you will make lots of mistakes on these things. So that's, this is just another tool for the toolbox, as they might say. All right. Here is the standard allegorical syllogism. Most things that are true of item X, the first well-known example, also seem to be true of item Y, the second less known example. The first example had item X, the first item X had feature A that we don't know whether or not the second example has. This is all we know about the matter. Therefore, probably the second example Y will have feature A. And again, we can plug in our examples from the previous slide. The first casino had an all-you-can-eat buffet. This, most of the things that are true of the second casino seem to be true of the first casino. Again, the first casino had the all-you-can-eat buffet. That's all we know. I bet if I look around this casino enough, they probably also have an all-you-can-eat buffet somewhere. Often that is the best way to make back your losses. All right, so what is not so great about analogical syllogisms? What are some drawbacks? Well, generally, these are going to be way less reliable than statistical syllogisms. Why? Because we're reasoning from a single instance. We're reasoning from a sample size of 1. If I put this up as a statistical sample, you would immediately click the button, too small of a sample size. And here's the other thing. We have to figure out what the relevant similarities between the two samples are that make them relevantly similar, and ignore irrelevant similarities. And we also have to distinguish between relevant differences that undermine the analogy and irrelevant differences that don't undermine the analogy. So let's take, for example, some student who is unhappy with their grade were to say, Silverman, you're like Hitler. I say, well, what do you mean by that? Well, you have white skin, you have a mustache, and you have a little bit of Semite in your background. I'd be like, okay, I guess that's right. But are those sort of relevant similarities? I mean, morally speaking, hopefully not. Where some differences, well, I'm an ethicist that's well known for promoting love-based ethics, agapic-based ethics. And I talk about things altruism rather than taking over the Sudetenland. So I would say, yes, there are some irrelevant similarities, but those are similarities that ought to be ignored. All right, so here's another example of this. Let's say I'm trying to figure out whether or not the casino I'm in has a all-you-can-eat buffet. And I say, well, you know what? The first casino I was in yesterday, it had a name that had a different first letter. I was in the Flamingo yesterday. Today I'm in Caesar's Palace. Thank you. And then the first casino had a name with a different second letter. Wow, we've got lots of differences. And when I walked in to the casino floor, Casino 1 had a quarter slot machine by the front entrance instead of a dollar slot machine. So there's all kinds of differences. But these are what we would probably identify as trivial differences. There's no reason to think that these differences will affect the likelihood of there being the all-important all-you-can-eat buffet somewhere in the casino. So those are trivial differences. On the other hand, there might be important differences that undermine the analogy in important ways. So, okay, these are both casinos, but the casino I was in yesterday was huge, and the casino I'm in today is small. And this undermines the analogy. Why? Well, the bigger your casino is, the more space there is for stuff like an all-you-can-eat buffet. And the one I was in yesterday, it had a bar. And the casino I'm today doesn't even have a bar. I mean, this is, even the Chuck E. Cheese, well, not the Chuck E. Cheese, but even like the Dave & Buster's has a bar. I mean, so, yeah, if it doesn't have a bar, a pretty good chance it doesn't have an all-you-can-eat buffet. And Casino 1 had a big sign advertising an all-you-can-eat buffet. And guess what, Casino 2? There's no sign advertising an all-you-can-eat buffet. I'm going to go home hungry if I'm not careful. Hopefully they have a snack machine. So again, here's how to defeat an argument by analogy. You want to identify as many differences between the two as possible, and you want to argue for the relevance of those differences to say, we were looking at these two things and they have sort of superficial similarities, but when you look more deeply, there's lots and lots of important differences. So at the end of the day, these are not relevant. These are not analogous to one another. All right, now here, strangely, one of the most notoriously difficult things that hopefully is almost certainly true is to prove that people other than yourself, or rather I should say humans other than yourself, actually possess personhood. And by personhood, we mean something like this. We mean when you, take a suspicious look at somebody near you and ask yourself, is this human-looking person, is this human-looking entity actually a person? Do they really experience emotions? Do they really think? Do they really have feelings? Do they really have a soul, if you prefer that language? Or are they just a good-looking robot? Or even worse, a zombie, metaphysically speaking? Something that looks human and has been programmed or trained or learned to act externally human, but their internal experience is radically different than my own. So there's a famous proof of one's own personhood. The proof of one's own personhood runs something like this. I think, therefore I am. Thank you, Rene Descartes. Cogito ergo sum, in the Latin. So I can prove my own existence and the own reality of my own personhood. But when you look at everybody else around you, guess what? I mean, unless you've got some sort of like science fiction mind meld thing you can do with them, it's actually really hard to prove. And philosophically speaking, it's, we after hundreds of years of analysis, we've decided it is actually like a real problem, philosophically speaking. So here is, roughly speaking, the best argument we have for why other people have personhood, or for why you should believe other people have personhood. Premise one, other humans seem like me in many ways. Look around the room, they have 2 hands, 2 feet, 10 fingers, 10 toes, they have hair, they have nose, they speak, they communicate with what seems to be emotion, they smile, which is something that we associate with emotions. On a bad day, maybe they frown or cry, which is something we associate with emotions. And these are all things that I do too. So we say, analogically speaking, they seem like me in lots and lots of ways. And then we say, well, wait a second. I've got this rich internal life. I think, therefore I am. I'm aware of my own emotions, pain, pleasures, values, goals, so forth. Maybe, most likely, you gotta be humble in the conclusion. Probabilistically speaking, most likely, other humans also have a similarly rich internal life. Oh, and by the way, if you find yourself doubting that, please visit our health center. Because that's like a really, really bad sign psychologically if you meaningfully doubt the personhood of others. I mean, one of the earliest important stages in moral development is to teach children to empathize with others. All right, well, let's get some practice. Let's say, I'm sure you all have nothing more interesting in your life to discuss than logic books and logic classes. I mean, because, it's so deep and profound. So let's say you're familiar with the logic book from this class. but no others. And your friend is taking logic with another professor with another book. And you think to yourself, well, wait a second. My book and my professor discuss analogical reasoning. I bet my friend's book will also have a section discussing analogical reasoning. Which of the following pieces of information would strengthen or weaken your argument to make the analogy stronger, and therefore the similarity more likely, or make the analogy weaker and make the prediction less likely, or have no effect? So let's say your friend's logic book is of a different color. Does it make the analogy stronger? Does it make it more likely that their book will also have a section on analogical reasoning? Does it make the analogy weaker and make it less likely that it will have a section on analogical reasoning? Or will it have no effect? Yeah, I mean, there's nothing about, color doesn't matter. There's nothing about a book's color that makes it more or less likely to have a section on analogical reasoning. In fact, this very logic book, I usually work out of the second edition. In fact, I think at the end of the semester, I buy some of the third edition. But I usually work out of the second edition, and it's a different color. And guess what? Shockingly, you know what it has a section on? Analogical reasoning. So, yeah, I mean, no effect is probably a good answer. What if your friend's book, like your book, has chapters on syllogisms, propositional logic, quantificational logic, and meaning and definition, just like yours? Does that strengthen the analogy, weaken the analogy, or make no difference? Good, yeah, 100%. You know, if we know that it's tracking sort of section by section, very similar content, that, you know, makes the analogy stronger and makes it more likely that that there will be a similar section on analogical reasoning. What if, though, watch out for this, what if your friend's course is taught by a member of the math department? For shame. Low budget logic. Would that strengthen the analogy, weaken the analogy, or have no effect? Good. Yeah, that would weaken the analogy. Why might that weaken the analogy? Good. So yeah, I mean, are there statistics involved in an analogy? Not really. I mean, you know, we definitely expect to see lots of statistical stuff. This is kind of an anti-math portion of the book, so that might be different. And the things that might be important to somebody teaching logic from the math department might be very different. Incidentally, historically, mathematicians and philosophers in ancient Greece, they were the same thing. Philosophers thought, with a bit of optimism, that one day all issues would be resolvable the way mathematical issues are resolvable. Hasn't worked out that way so far, but I still have a bust of Pythagoras in my office, so maybe it will someday. Your friend's chapter on syllogisms doesn't use the STAR test. Does that strengthen the analogy, weaken the analogy, or make no difference on whether or not you would expect it to have have a section on analogical reasoning. Weakens is a good answer. However, the best answer is probably no effect, but only if you realize a piece of information most of you probably did not realize. Does anyone know where the STAR test comes from? The STAR test is a genuine invention, a genuine innovation of one not so famous professor named Gensler. So if somebody's book doesn't use the STAR test, it just means it wasn't written by Gensler. So at the end of the day, it actually would have no effect if you realize that nuance the information. But those of you who hit weaken, I mean, I think if you hadn't realized that, that's a good way of analyzing the data. It sounds like it should be a significant difference, but it's not if you just realize every logic book not written by Gensler doesn't use the STAR test. What if your friend's book is abstract and doesn't have many real-life examples? Does that strengthen the analogy, weaken the analogy, or have no effect? Yeah, I mean, Gensler presumably is thinking his book has lots of real life examples and gives lots of concrete examples. So he thinks that's going to weaken the analogy. What if your friend's book isn't published by Routledge Press? Publishers of fine logic books. Yeah, that probably doesn't have an effect. I mean, Routledge is a good press, but there's several good presses, and Routledge doesn't have like a commission on, it doesn't have like a copyright on using reasoning by analogy. So there's no reason that in and of itself should make the difference. Probably something by Oxford or Cambridge University Press or Princeton that probably would also have all the same strengths. What if your friend's book is entirely on informal logic? Does that strengthen the metaphor, strengthen the analogy, weaken the analogy, or make no difference? Yeah, well, here's the thing you have to realize. Your book is largely on formal logic. So, analogy is, so it is a difference. And I guess the question is whether or not you want to include analogy as a piece of informal reasoning. I would say that this weakens it. Your friend's book has cartoons. Where's my cartoons? Yeah, probably that doesn't have an effect. I mean, maybe it speaks to lower quality, but not really. I mean, that's cartoons are just one of many possible ways of communicating ideas. So that shouldn't make it less likely that it has a section on analogical reasoning. What if your friend's book has 100 pages on inductive reasoning? Does that strengthen your strengthen the analogy, weaken the analogy, or no effect? Does it make it more likely likely, less likely, whether or not we expect a section on analogical reasoning. Yeah, that should strengthen it. In case you didn't notice, how many pages do you have on inductive reasoning? You've got like 30 to 40. So if your friend's book has 100, that's more space on the section where you would expect analogical reasoning to appear. So it makes it more likely. What if your friend's book only has 10 pages on inductive reasoning? Good. That means it has a lot less on inductive reasoning, and there's less space where we would expect to find analogical reasoning, so it's less likely. Very good. All right, here's a second set of problems. Let's say your friend at another school took an ethics course that discussed utilitarianism, which is one of the three major approaches to ethics. You are taking an ethics course here next semester, and you think to yourself, my friend's course discussed utilitarianism, so my course likely will too. Which of these pieces of information would strengthen or weaken your argument? The friend's teacher that teaches at the other college will also be teaching your course as well. Does that make it more likely, less likely, or no effect? Yeah, that strengthens it quite a bit. Often professors work off the same notes, no matter where they're teaching, and if that teacher thinks utilitarianism is important enough to teach in one class, he probably thinks it's important enough to teach in another class, or really the same class at a different college. So that seems pretty likely to strengthen it. What if your friend's course was in medical ethics, but your course is in general ethical theory? Does that strengthen our analogy, weaken it, or have no effect? Good, yeah, it certainly definitely weakens it. I mean, in a medical ethics course, you're going to talk an awful lot, not about broad theories, but about very specific scenarios or very specific issues. That being said, I would think that, it should certainly say something about utilitarianism, but definitely makes the analogy weaker and less certain. What if both courses use the same textbook? Yeah, that strengthens it enormously. I mean, that probably makes it more certain than if you've got the same teacher using the same textbook. That generally, outlines what you will cover. Your friend's teacher has a good reputation, but your ethics professor does not. Yeah, that probably weakens the analogy. I mean, if you've got a bad enough teacher, they might not know that utilitarianism is an important part of ethics, or might not care. I'm aware of one college where one of their philosophy courses had this guy, and when they found out what he was actually teaching in their intro class, it was stuff like making everyone keep dream analysis journals and study things like the Myers-Briggs personality test. Yeah, don't get me wrong, I think dreams are cool, and I like the Myers-Briggs personality test, but I'm fairly certain that's not philosophy. That's like pop psychology. Ah, your teacher is a Marxist, while your friend is not. There to teach all you capitalist swine. Now, you would hope it would have no effect, but pretty good chance. I mean, people have their ideological biases, and if different professors have different priorities, it might reflect what goes into the curriculum. And there's actually nothing particularly Marxist about utilitarianism. In fact, the John Stuart Mill, one of the influential people in utilitarianism, if anything, he argues for something like libertarianism, something very, very small, decentralized, government-wise, something very not Marxist-y. All right. Well, that is that. I don't know. Questions about reasoning from syllogisms, analogies? We've got enough time. Maybe I should try to go over some questions from the exam. I'm not sure if we'll get all the way through this, but let me see what I can get to. Oh, that is the wrong year. All right, so let's talk about each of these. Now, a couple things I'll note. Due to either a mathematical error or my generosity, I chose for there to be 104 possible points on this test. So there was basically an extra bonus question that you could score up to 104%. All right, so multiple choice definitions. What term refers to the view that if there's no way to test a statement, then that statement is meaningless? That is called logical positivism. Which term refers to claims that are internally incoherent? The correct answer is the idea of being self-contradictory. Next definition. What term refers to the view that if the truth of a claim could make no practical difference, then that claim is meaningless? That is pragmatism. Definition of a particular fallacy. Which fallacy attempts to disprove a belief based on how that belief came to be held? That is called the genetic fallacy. That's where you shift the discussion from whether or not a claim is true, instead to tell a story about why you hold this belief. And of course, that actually, in fact, provides no evidence as to whether or not that belief is actually true. What fallacy attempts to come to a conclusion on a matter based on the fact that the data is ambiguous or inconclusive? That is what we call the fallacy of ignorance, the appeal to ignorance. Reason something like this: no one has disproved this view, therefore this view must be true. Or the other way: no one has proven this view, therefore the view must be false. No one has proven that the COVID vaccine doesn't turn you into a zombie 2 years after you take it. Therefore, it must turn you into a zombie. I'm fairly certain one of the zombie movies said the zombie virus was on a vaccine. Probably doesn't help our society. All right. A priori, a posteriori. Triangle has 3 angles. That's a priori. It's true by definition. It's right there in the word. That's what it means. You don't have to look out at the world to figure out that the triangle has 3 angles. You just have to know what the word means. Water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit on that sea level plane. That is an a posteriori claim. that is not true by definition. It's something you have to go to that sea level plane and try it. In philosophy 205, earning an A requires a 93 average in the class. That is an a priori truth. That is how I defined what an A is worth, or what you need to do to get an A in the syllabus. Water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius at sea level. Now, unlike the Fahrenheit thing, the Celsius scale is defined by the freezing point and boiling point of water at sea level. So that for 0 degrees Celsius, freezing point is an a priori claim. Anything that is red is colored is also an a priori claim. It is based on the definition of the word. A somewhat more wooden way of saying this is anything that is red is the color red. Analytic, synthetic, and self-contradictory. There are 5-foot-long blue ants in the hallway. This is a synthetic claim and hopefully false. It's not true by definition, but it's also not self-contradictory. All bachelors are messy. This is a synthetic claim. There's nothing about the term bachelor that means messy person, though that is a traditional stereotype. All frogs are either green or some other color. This is an analytic truth, not because of the meaning of the word frog, but because of the meanings of the words all either are trait or not that trait. That is an analytic claim. Some triangles have 4 sides. That is self-contradictory. If you know the definition of a triangle, you don't have to go around looking to know that it can't have 4 sides. If all Martians are Virginians, and if all Virginians are Canadians, then all Martians are Canadians. Now, this one was a little bit tricky, but this one is analytic. And what makes it analytic is the use of the word if. So when you use the word if, you are using a hypothetical tone, and the relationships here can be false. But if these were the relationships, if A equals B and B equals C, then A will equal C. 100 times out of 100. That is analytically true. Some fallacies. Do you only seem like an idiot? This is the trick question, complex question. No one has disproven the existence of pixies, therefore they must exist. That is the appeal to ignorance. LeBron James says that Hoosiers is the best movie ever. In case you missed the joke, Hoosiers is a movie about basketball. And LeBron James as a basketball player might be somewhat biased on that. But LeBron James is a good guy if you want to learn how to slam dunk a basketball, probably not an expert on movies. Most people vote for the MTV party, and so should you. That is standard appeal to the crowd. We should reject my opponent's healthcare plan because it will burn senior citizens' homes to the ground. That is almost certainly a straw man. No one's healthcare plan involves burning people's homes to the ground. You should try smoking, since you'll enjoy it, lose weight, and get more breaks at work. This is the pro-con fallacy. Even if all these things are true, they're probably pros. But the elevated chance of dying 10 to 20 years early from something like lung cancer is a pretty big con we're leaving out there. Lower class Americans are uneducated and immoral, therefore their political views must be wrong. That is a standard ad hominem attack. From the Godfather movie, you should agree to our terms. Either your name will be on the contract or your brains will be on the contract. That, of course, is the appeal to force. These 3-year-long magazine subscriptions are only $3 per week, so they must be very inexpensive. Anyone who can do basic math, 3 times 52 is 156, times another 3 is over $450. Your inexpensive magazines are going to cost you $450 plus. That is the composition part whole fallacy. The fascists want to make the school year longer, so we should make it shorter instead. That, of course, is the opposition fallacy. Crime goes up whenever ice cream sales go up. Therefore, we need to regulate ice cream. This, of course, is the false cause post hoc fallacy. It's ice cream does not cause crime. I know that my mind works well and I'm not crazy. I've thought about it a lot, and I'm confident that the logic of my argument is airtight. All right, so the conclusion is my mind works well. My evidence is I've thought about it with my mind, which I assume works well. That is standard circular logic, and it is also something Rene Descartes in particular has been accused of. Professor Silverman grew up in New Jersey, so he must be very cynical, have a strong New Jersey accent, and look like one of the characters from Jersey Shore. Strong argument. That, of course, is a false stereotype. You don't really love Sarah, you just think you do because you were lonely when you met her, so you should try dating other people instead of marrying her. This is the genetic fallacy. It tells a story about how you came to a belief. It doesn't really address anything more substantial. The letters of recommendation say you will be very lucky to get this candidate to work for you, so you should hire him and be confident he will do a lot of high quality work. This, of course, is the ambiguity fallacy. Someone saying that you'll be very lucky if this candidate will work for you. That might mean they're so incredibly lazy that they will never do any work. Tone, backwards country, of course, is a negative tone. We don't like things that are backwards. Freedom fighters are positive. In our culture, we love freedom. And a 70-year-old person, that is a fairly neutral way of describing somebody who happens to be 70. Definitions, college students means college sophomores. The definition is too narrow. Obviously, there are other college students other than sophomores. Atonement means that which serves to atone. That is a standard circular definition. If you don't know what atonement is, you probably don't know what it means if it serves to atone. Bachelor means bastard who stays single. That is the wrong tone. That shifts from something with a neutral tone to something with an overly negative tone. And quarterbacks means football players. Obviously, there are more football players than just quarterbacks. Therefore, that relationship, that definition is too broad. There you have it. Most did pretty well. I was happy with your performance on this. Some of these kinds of questions will appear on the final, but don't get cocky. Grades on exams 3 and 4 correlate with exam 1 much, much more than they do with exam 6. Yes, ma'am. Yes, there will be an exam 3, and then there will be a final exam. Nope, you're not out of the woods yet. You got one more. Yes. At some point, yes, before the final. All right, on that note, enjoy the not so warm, almost spring day. Good luck. Thank you all. I expect to see you all here on Wednesday when I will tell you the deep truths of the mathematical universe. What did your mail say? You traveling?
Yeah, my parents have to get me on.
And I'll send around the link. So there you go. Yes.
I was referring back to the syllabus a couple days ago, and I remember seeing like the extra credit is listed as 20%.
Extra credit?
Yeah, that's what it said.
That's a pretty significant typo. It should say homework and participation combined are worth 20%.
Okay, and then I guess another question I have for you is, will we be given like an estimate of where our grade stands with the participation, and that goes before the withdrawal date?
If you want one, you can email me, and I will.
Okay.
I will.
Okay. I'm Caitlin. I'm just going to email you.
Yes. Yeah, you doing okay?
Yeah, I guess.
So you were
No, I was the RA involved, but it was,
still traumatic.
yeah, it was.
I mean, that was not funny, but I just read the
Yeah. Same night.
Yeah.
I care a lot about your class. I'm just for clarification, attendance and participation are just so.
Yeah.
When you sign in, like, this is, hi Caitlin, like,
Yeah,
Or
I
that,
got it,
right.
yeah, I got it.
just making sure.
So yeah, attendance participation is 10%. Here, let's,
And then is that like off of the, like, I'm sure you covered it at the beginning, is that like, for example, today, like, with a lot of questions, like, oh, like, the book said this.